They tried to stay strong when everyone else was watching, but the moment they started talking about you, their voice completely changed. From that hospital room, surrounded by people asking them to rest, there was only one message they were desperate to make sure reached you. They didn't ask for sympathy. They didn't talk about what they were going through. They talked about the one person they couldn't stop thinking about, you. And near the end of that message, they admitted something they had been hiding for far too long. Something that could completely change the way you understand everything that happened between you. Listen carefully, because this wasn't some ordinary message sent during an emotional moment. Your soulmate had been lying there with more time than usual to think, to remember, and to replay the choices that brought the two of you to this point. The silence around them forced them to face feelings they had spent months, maybe even years, trying to avoid. There were no distractions left, no arguments to hide behind, no other people telling them what decision they should make. For once, they were alone with the truth, and the truth kept leading them back to you. Someone close to them noticed it first. Every time their phone lit up, they looked toward it as though they were hoping your name would appear. Every time footsteps passed outside the room, they looked toward the door. They tried not to explain why. They tried to pretend they were simply tired. But eventually someone asked the question they had been avoiding. Who are you waiting for? And for several seconds, your soulmate said absolutely nothing. Then they whispered your name. The room became quiet, because everyone there knew there was history behind that name. They knew there were feelings that had never completely disappeared. They knew there had been distance, misunderstandings, outside opinions, painful decisions, and things left unsaid. But what they didn't know was just how deeply your soulmate still carried you inside their heart. That was when they asked for the phone. At first, everyone thought they were going to call someone in the family. Instead, they opened the recording app. Their hands were unsteady, not because they didn't know what to say, but because they had too much to say and no idea where to begin. They stared at the screen for several moments before finally pressing record. The first words came out softly. I don't know if you'll ever hear this. Then they stopped. They took a breath and started again. I don't know if I still have the right to say any of this to you. I don't know if you've moved on. I don't know if hearing my voice would make things better or only reopen something you worked hard to close. But there's one thing I can't keep pretending anymore. Their eyes filled with tears. And suddenly, all the pride that had kept them silent began disappearing. They admitted that leaving you behind had never felt as easy as they made it look. They admitted that there were nights when they almost reached out but stopped themselves at the last second. They admitted that they had written messages to you, erased them, rewritten them, and then convinced themselves that remaining silent was somehow the right thing to do. But lying there in that hospital room changed something inside them. They realized how much time had already been wasted. They realized how many important words had been postponed because they believed there would always be another day to say them. And most painfully, they realized that the person they wanted to hear from during one of the most emotional moments of their life was the same person they had pushed away. You. Don't skip this part, because this is where the message became much more personal. Your soulmate lowered their voice and said, I need you to know that whatever you were told about why I walked away, it wasn't the entire truth. That sentence shocked the person standing nearby. Because suddenly this wasn't only a message about missing you. It was becoming a confession. Your soulmate continued, saying there had been pressure surrounding your connection that you never fully knew about. Conversations happened without you. Opinions were given about you when you weren't there to defend yourself. Certain people convinced them that choosing you would create problems they weren't emotionally prepared to handle at the time. And instead of trusting what they felt, they became afraid. They listened to other voices more than they listened to their own heart. They started questioning things they had once been certain about. And slowly, they allowed fear to make decisions that love should have made. But here is what hurt them the most. The people who encouraged that distance eventually continued with their own lives. Your soulmate was the one left carrying the consequences. They were the one waking up wondering what would have happened if they had fought harder. They were the one remembering your conversations, your laughter, the way you noticed when something was wrong even when they said they were fine, the way you cared about parts of them other people barely understood. They confessed that they had tried to recreate that feeling elsewhere. It never worked. They could meet new people. They could stay busy. They could smile in photographs. They could convince everyone around them that the past no longer mattered. but deep inside there was still one unfinished chapter. And it had your name written all over it. Then your soulmate said something that made the person beside them look away because it was too emotional to watch. "I thought losing you would eventually stop hurting." Their voice broke. "But I think I only became better at hiding it." For several seconds, there was nothing but silence on the recording. Your soulmate wiped their face and tried to continue. "They said they weren't sending this message because they expected you to instantly forgive them. They weren't asking you to forget the pain. They weren't even sure what place, if any, they still had in your life. They simply couldn't allow another important moment to pass without finally telling you the truth. Because whether the two of you ever find your way back to each other or not, they wanted you to know one thing: you mattered. More than they admitted, more than they showed, and much more than the ending of your story ever made it appear. But then something happened. Your soulmate stopped speaking and looked toward the person beside the bed. They asked, "Did you tell them about the letter?" The person immediately froze, because apparently there was another message meant for you, one your soulmate had written long before they ever entered that hospital. A message they never had the courage to send. And according to what was said next, that letter contains the real reason they disappeared from your life in the first place. The person standing beside the bed hesitated before answering, because that letter had been kept hidden for a reason. Your soulmate had written it during one of the most difficult nights of their life, long before the hospital, long before this emotional message, and long before they finally admitted how much losing you had affected them. They had folded it carefully, placed it inside an envelope, and written only your name across the front, but they never sent it. Every time they thought about giving it to you, fear stopped them. They told themselves the moment had passed. They told themselves you were probably better without them. They told themselves reopening the past would only create more pain. Yet somehow they could never bring themselves to destroy that letter either. It stayed hidden, and that alone says something important, because people don't usually protect something for that long unless it still carries meaning. Your soulmate looked toward the person beside them and asked again, "Do you still have it?" There was a long silence before the answer came. "Yes." Your soulmate closed their eyes. For a moment they seemed relieved. Then they said, "If I can't explain everything properly, I need them to read it." The person beside them asked whether they were sure. Your soulmate didn't hesitate this time. "I've already waited too long." That sentence changed the entire mood in the room, because now everyone understood that this wasn't simply emotion caused by being in the hospital. Your soulmate had been carrying this truth for a very long time. The hospital had simply removed the excuses they once used to keep hiding it. The letter was brought out. The envelope looked older than anyone expected. Your name was written across the front in handwriting that had faded slightly with time. Your soulmate stared at it without touching it. Their face changed immediately. It was as if every memory connected to that moment returned all at once. They remembered writing it. They remembered crying while writing certain lines. They remembered stopping halfway through because admitting the truth on paper felt almost as frightening as saying it directly to you. And they remembered the exact reason they decided not to send it. Someone had convinced them that you didn't want to hear from them. That information had changed everything. Your soulmate believed you had already made your decision. They believed reaching out would only humiliate them. So instead of asking you directly, they trusted what someone else told them. And that mistake created a distance neither of you completely understood. The person beside the bed slowly opened the letter. Your soulmate immediately said, "Wait." Their voice was shaking again. "There's something in there they need to understand before they read the rest." The first few lines were simple, but emotionally, they were devastating. "I'm writing this because I don't know how to say goodbye to someone I never wanted to lose." Your soulmate looked away. That sentence alone revealed something you may never have known. They didn't walk away because they had stopped caring. They walked away while still loving you, and that made what happened next even more painful. The letter explained that during the final weeks before the separation, your soulmate had become overwhelmed by pressure coming from several directions. People close to them questioned whether the relationship could survive. Someone repeatedly brought up your differences. Someone else warned them that staying with you would eventually force them to choose between love and family expectations. At first, your soulmate ignored it, but the pressure continued. Then came one conversation that changed everything. Someone told your soulmate that you had supposedly said you were tired of fighting for the relationship. They claimed you had started questioning whether the connection was worth the emotional stress. Your soulmate believed it, and instead of confronting you, they shut down. They became distant, colder, quieter. You may have wondered why their behavior suddenly changed. You may have thought their feelings disappeared overnight. But according to that letter, the truth was completely different. Your soulmate was already grieving a relationship they believed you no longer wanted, so they tried to leave before you could leave them. They thought walking away first would hurt less. It didn't. In fact, the letter admitted that the moment they created distance between you, they immediately regretted it. But pride became involved, then confusion. Then too much time passed, and eventually both of you were standing on opposite sides of a misunderstanding, neither one fully created. Your soulmate's voice cracked while the letter was being read. They said, "That's the part I should have told them years ago." But there was more, much more. Halfway through the letter, your soulmate had written something that nobody in that hospital room expected. They admitted that after the separation, they discovered the information they had been given about you might not have been true. They started asking questions. They compared what different people had told them. And slowly, inconsistencies started appearing. One person claimed you had said one thing. Another remembered something completely different. Someone else admitted they never actually heard you say anything directly. That was when your soulmate realized something terrible. They may have lost you because of a story that was never true. That realization stayed with them. It followed them into new relationships, into family gatherings, into quiet nights when they wondered why something that had once felt so real ended so suddenly. And every time they thought about contacting you, another fear appeared. What if you hated them now? What if you had completely moved on? What if telling you the truth only made you realize how easily they had allowed someone else to influence them? So they remained silent, but the silence never gave them peace. It only created more regret. Your soulmate looked toward the phone that was still recording and spoke directly to you again. "I need you to understand something. I didn't replace you emotionally. I tried to convince myself that I had. There's a difference." They paused. "I kept comparing everyone to the way I felt with you." Their voice softened. And that wasn't fair to anyone. That admission was difficult for them, because it meant accepting that they had spent a long time running from something they never truly resolved. They said there were moments when they almost contacted you on birthdays, holidays, and ordinary nights, when a song, a place, or a memory unexpectedly brought you back into their mind. Sometimes they even typed your name into their phone. Sometimes they opened old conversations. Sometimes they stared at your number for minutes, but they never pressed call, until now. The hospital changed the way they saw all that hesitation. Suddenly, all the reasons they had used to stay silent seemed small compared with the possibility of never telling you anything at all. Don't skip this part, because this is where the message stopped sounding like regret and started sounding like a decision. Your soulmate said, "If they're willing to hear me, I don't want anyone speaking for me anymore." The person beside the bed asked what that meant. Your soulmate answered immediately, "It means I want to tell them everything myself, not through family, not through friends, not through rumors, directly." For the first time, your soulmate was ready to face whatever reaction came afterward. Forgiveness, anger, silence, questions. They said they could accept any of those things. What they could no longer accept was leaving you with a false version of why everything ended. But then the person holding the letter noticed something unusual near the bottom of the final page. A name, someone's name, the same person your soulmate had once trusted more than anyone during your separation. Your soulmate saw the name too, and suddenly their expression completely changed, because beside that name, they had written one sentence years ago that they had apparently forgotten. A sentence revealing that this person had personally come to them with proof that you wanted the relationship to end. Your soulmate immediately asked, "Where is that proof now?" Nobody answered. Then one person in the room quietly admitted that the so-called proof still existed. And when your soulmate demanded to see it, they discovered something about that old message that made them sit completely still. Because the message they had believed came from you may never have been written by you at all. The room became completely silent when that possibility was spoken out loud. Your soulmate stared at the old message for several seconds, reading every word again, as if their mind refused to accept what they were seeing. For years, they had believed those sentences came directly from you. They had built one of the biggest decisions of their life around them. They had allowed those words to convince them that you no longer wanted to fight for the relationship. But now, looking at the message with fresh eyes, something felt wrong. There was no original conversation attached to it, no direct thread, no clear timestamp connecting it back to you. It was only a screenshot. And suddenly, your soulmate remembered something they had completely overlooked at the time. The screenshot had been sent to them by someone else, not by you. Back then, they were too emotional to question it. They were already confused, exhausted, and surrounded by people telling them that holding on to you was making their life harder. So when someone appeared with what looked like proof that you were ready to walk away, your soulmate accepted it without investigating. Now they were asking the questions they should have asked years ago. Who took this screenshot? Nobody answered immediately. Where did it come from? Still nothing. Did anyone ever actually hear them say these words? The person beside the bed slowly shook their head. That answer hit your soulmate harder than anyone expected, because for the first time, they understood that one of the strongest pieces of evidence they had used against you had never actually been verified. They covered their face with both hands, not because they were angry with you, because they were angry with themselves. They whispered, "I let this destroy everything." Someone tried to tell them not to blame themselves, but your soulmate wasn't ready to hear comfort. They wanted answers. They wanted to know why someone had been so determined to convince them that you were done. And more importantly, they wanted to know whether that person had manipulated other things too. The old letter suddenly became even more important. Your soulmate asked for the final page to be read. Near the bottom, there was another paragraph they had written years ago. It described one specific night. A night when they had almost decided to come see you. They had already made up their mind. They were tired of listening to everyone else. They wanted to sit in front of you, look you directly in the eyes, and ask whether the relationship still mattered. But before they could leave, someone called them. That call lasted nearly an hour, and by the time it ended, your soulmate had completely changed their decision. In the letter, they had written, "Maybe they're right. Maybe going back will only make me look foolish." Your soulmate stared at those words. Then they asked, "Who called me that night?" One person in the room knew, and when the name was finally spoken, your soulmate went quiet. It was the same name written beside the suspicious screenshot. The same person who had supposedly brought the proof. The same person who had repeatedly told your soulmate that you had moved on. Now the pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Your soulmate immediately asked for their phone. They wanted to call that person. Someone told them to rest. They refused. "I've rested from the truth long enough." Their voice was stronger now. The emotional message meant for you had transformed into something else. A search for answers. The number was dialed. Everyone in the room waited. 1 ring, 2, 3, then someone answered. Your soulmate didn't waste time with greetings. They asked one question. "Where did you get that screenshot you showed me?" Silence came from the other end. Your soulmate repeated the question. This time the person responded carefully. They said they didn't remember. Your soulmate immediately knew something was wrong, because this person had once treated that screenshot like undeniable proof. Now suddenly they couldn't remember where it came from. Your soulmate's tone changed. "You told me it came from them." The person replied, "That's what I was told." Your soulmate froze, because years ago that wasn't the story. Years ago this person had made it sound as though they personally knew the message was real. Now they were admitting they had heard it from someone else. "Who told you?" Another long silence. Your soulmate looked around the hospital room. Nobody moved. Finally, the person on the phone said a name, and your soulmate's expression changed instantly, because that name belonged to someone who had been much closer to your relationship than anyone realized. Someone who knew when the two of you were struggling. Someone who knew exactly what your soulmate feared losing. Someone who had been present during conversations where your future together was discussed. And someone who had always acted supportive in front of you. Your soulmate asked, "Why would they do that?" The answer was unsettling. "I think they believed they were protecting you from each other." Your soulmate almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Protecting us?" Then their voice broke. "They helped destroy us." The person on the phone became defensive. They claimed nobody intended for things to go this far. They said everyone believed the relationship was becoming too complicated. They said they thought distance would eventually help both of you move on. But your soulmate wasn't listening anymore. Because one phrase kept repeating in their mind. Nobody intended for things to go this far. That meant there had been a plan. Maybe not a plan to destroy your lives forever, but there had been deliberate interference. Your soulmate asked the question that nobody wanted them to ask. Did they create the screenshot? The person on the phone refused to answer directly. That refusal was enough. Your soulmate ended the call. For several minutes, they said nothing. Then they looked at the phone recording the message for you. Their eyes were full of regret. "I owe you an apology bigger than I know how to give." They admitted that they had blamed you for becoming distant. They had convinced themselves that you stopped fighting. They had replayed imagined conversations in their mind where you had supposedly chosen to give up. But now they were facing the possibility that you may have been waiting for them while they were being told you had already walked away. That realization was devastating. Your soulmate said, "What if we were both waiting?" Nobody answered, because everyone understood how painful that possibility was. What if you thought they stopped caring? What if they thought you stopped caring? What if the distance wasn't created by the absence of love at all? What if it grew because neither of you knew what the other person had actually been told? Your soulmate looked down at the letter again. There was another line near the end. "I wish they would give me one reason to believe I'm wrong." They had written that years ago. And now they realized you may never have known they were waiting for that reason. The person beside the bed asked what they wanted to do next. Your soulmate answered without hesitation. "Send them the recording." Then they changed their mind. "No." Everyone looked confused. Your soulmate continued. "Send the letter too." They wanted you to hear the confession. They wanted you to see the words they had written before pride and time changed everything. They wanted you to know that their feelings hadn't suddenly appeared because they were lying in a hospital. They had existed all along, hidden behind fear, regret, wrong information, and silence. But before anything could be sent, your soulmate asked for one more thing. They wanted the original screenshot examined carefully, not emotionally, not through memory. They wanted someone to compare it with old messages, dates, and conversations. They needed to know whether there was any chance the screenshot could actually have come from you. The person beside them enlarged the image. That was when they noticed something strange at the top, a tiny detail, something nobody had paid attention to years ago. The contact name shown in the screenshot looked like yours, but the number underneath it didn't match. Your soulmate stopped breathing for a second. They asked to see it again. The number was checked against an old contact record. It was different, completely different. Someone in that room whispered, "Then who was this?" Your soulmate didn't answer, because suddenly the story was no longer about someone misunderstanding your words. Someone may have created an entirely fake conversation and made it look like you had written it. And there was only one reason to do something like that. They wanted your soulmate to believe you had rejected them. But the biggest shock was still coming, because when they searched that unfamiliar number, your soulmate recognized exactly who it belonged to. And it was someone who had once stood in front of both of you, pretending they wanted your love story to survive. The moment your soulmate recognized that number, something inside them completely changed. Until then, there had still been a small part of them, hoping this entire situation could be explained away as a misunderstanding. Maybe somebody had repeated the wrong information. Maybe an old conversation had been taken out of context. Maybe emotions had made everyone remember things differently. But now there was a number directly connected to the person who had once smiled in front of both of you, offered advice about your relationship, and repeatedly claimed they wanted the two of you to work things out. Your soulmate stared at the screen and whispered, "It was them." Nobody needed to ask who. Everyone in that room could see from their face that this was someone important, someone trusted, someone who had been allowed close enough to know exactly where the cracks in your relationship were, and apparently close enough to make those cracks much bigger. Your soulmate began remembering old moments differently. Conversations that once seemed harmless suddenly felt suspicious. Questions that person used to ask about you. Comments they made after arguments. The way they always seemed to know when the two of you were going through something difficult. At the time, your soulmate believed that person was simply concerned. Now they wondered whether they had been gathering information, learning what frightened your soulmate, learning what could make them doubt you, learning exactly what kind of message would be powerful enough to convince them that you were ready to leave. Your soulmate asked someone to pull up the old contact history. The number had not been used in years, but there it was. Connected to the same person, there was no reasonable way to explain it. Your soulmate's eyes filled again, but this time the emotion was different. This wasn't only sadness, it was anger, not the loud kind. The kind that comes when you finally understand how much of your life may have been shaped by someone else's interference. They said quietly, they knew exactly what they were doing. Someone in the room tried to suggest there might still be another explanation. Your soulmate shook their head. No, they knew what I was afraid of. They knew I thought I was going to lose them. Then they looked toward the phone recording the message for you. And they gave me exactly what I needed to believe I already had. That realization hurt, because your soulmate now understood that the fake message had not been random. It had been designed specifically for them. It used language that sounded believable. It mentioned details from your relationship that only a few people knew. It made it appear as though you were exhausted, finished, and ready to move forward without them. And your soulmate had reacted exactly the way whoever created it hoped they would. They pulled away. They stopped asking questions. They became cold before you had the chance to understand why. And when you possibly responded to that sudden distance with confusion or hurt, your soulmate interpreted your reaction as further proof that the fake message must have been real. It became a trap. One misunderstanding created another, then another, until eventually both of you were hurting too much to speak honestly. Your soulmate closed their eyes and said something that made the entire room uncomfortable. I punished them for words they never said. Nobody responded, because there was nothing easy to say to that. Your soulmate remembered the arguments, the times they accused you of not caring enough, the moments they told you that your actions had already made your decision clear. You may have stood there wondering what they were talking about. You may have tried to explain. Maybe you even asked what had changed. But your soulmate was carrying proof they never showed you. They assumed you knew exactly what you had supposedly done, and that is why your explanations may have sounded dishonest to them at the time. Now they finally understood. You weren't avoiding responsibility. You may have had no idea what you were being accused of. Your soulmate looked down at the hospital blanket and whispered, "I should have asked them directly." Then they said it again. "I should have asked you." That sentence carried years of regret, because one honest conversation could have changed everything. One direct question, one moment of choosing you over rumors, but neither of you got that moment. Don't skip this part, because what your soulmate did next surprised everyone. They asked for that person to be called immediately, not the person who originally delivered the screenshot, the person whose number appeared inside it. The person your soulmate now suspected had created the entire thing. Someone in the room warned them that they were emotionally exhausted. Your soulmate refused to wait. "If I wait again, I'll do exactly what I did before." They dialed the number. The first call went unanswered. They called again. Nothing. On the third attempt, someone finally picked up. There was silence. Your soulmate didn't introduce themselves. They simply said, "I found the screenshot." The person on the other end didn't respond. Your soulmate continued, "I found the number." Still silence. Then your soulmate asked the question that had been waiting for years. "Why did you make me believe they wanted me gone?" A deep breath came through the phone. The person finally spoke. And the first thing they said was not a denial. It was, "You weren't supposed to find out like this." Your soulmate's face changed instantly. Everyone in the room heard it. Those words were almost a confession by themselves. Your soulmate asked, "So you did it?" The person tried to slow everything down. They said the situation was more complicated than your soulmate understood. They claimed they had reasons. They claimed they thought the relationship was becoming unhealthy for everyone involved. They claimed they believed separating the two of you was the safest choice at the time. Your soulmate interrupted. "That wasn't your choice to make." The person became quiet. Your soulmate's voice grew sharper. "You let me think they abandoned me." The response came slowly. "I thought eventually you would both move on." Your soulmate looked toward the old letter, then toward the recording meant for you, and they said, "We didn't." That was the first moment the person on the phone seemed shaken. Your soulmate continued, "You moved on with your life. Everyone else moved on with theirs. But we were the ones who had to live with what you did." The person tried to apologize. Your soulmate refused to accept it yet. They wanted the full truth. They wanted to know why this person had cared so much about separating you. The answer came reluctantly. At first, they blamed family pressure, then timing, then concerns about the future. But your soulmate kept pushing. "Why you?" That question finally broke through the excuses. The person admitted that they had never believed your relationship would fit into the future they imagined for your soulmate. They thought they knew better. They thought they could protect your soulmate from making a decision they might regret, so they manipulated the situation. They created distance. They passed information between people. And when that wasn't enough, they helped create the message that made your soulmate believe you had emotionally given up. Your soulmate asked, "Did they ever say they wanted to leave me?" The person went silent. Your soulmate repeated the question. This time there was nowhere left to hide. "No," one word. That was all it took. Your soulmate lowered the phone. Their eyes filled instantly. Because for years they had believed you made a decision you apparently never made. They had carried anger toward you for something someone else invented. They had used that anger to justify staying away. And now the truth had finally reached them from the person directly responsible. But your soulmate wasn't finished. They asked another question. "Did they ever try to contact me after we separated?" The person on the phone didn't answer. Your soulmate sat up slightly. "Did they?" A quiet voice finally said, "Yes." Everything stopped. Your soulmate looked stunned, because they had always believed you disappeared completely. But now they were hearing that you had tried to reach them. They asked how many times. The person said they couldn't remember exactly. Your soulmate immediately knew that wasn't true. "How many?" Finally, the answer came. "More than once. You had reached out. You had tried to explain. You had tried to ask what happened. And some of those attempts never reached your soulmate. The person admitted that at least one message had been intercepted. One message you sent after the separation. A message your soulmate had never seen. Your soulmate's voice became almost inaudible. What did it say? The person refused to repeat it from memory, but they admitted something else. The message still existed. It had been saved years ago. Your soulmate immediately demanded that it be sent. Minutes later, the phone vibrated. A screenshot appeared. This time, it really was from you. Your soulmate opened it. The date matched the exact period when they believed you had already given up. They started reading, and by the second sentence, tears were running down their face. Because your message said almost the complete opposite of what they had been told. You weren't walking away. You weren't rejecting them. You were asking them to talk to you. You were asking what had happened. And near the end, you had written one line that your soulmate had spent years wishing they had heard. If you still want us, I'm still here. Your soulmate covered their mouth. The room went completely silent. Because now there was no doubt left. The two of you had not lost each other because love disappeared. You had lost each other while both of you were still waiting. But then your soulmate noticed something beneath your old message. There was another screenshot attached, one they had never seen before. It showed the reply someone had sent back to you while pretending to speak for your soulmate. And when your soulmate read what you were told in return, they realized the betrayal had been far worse than anyone had admitted. Your soulmate stared at that second screenshot for so long that nobody in the room dared to interrupt them. The message was short, but it carried enough weight to explain years of silence. Someone had replied to you pretending to speak on behalf of your soulmate, telling you there was nothing left to discuss. You had been told that your soulmate had already made their decision, that they wanted distance, and that contacting them again would only make things harder. But your soulmate had never written those words. They had never approved them. They had never even known the message existed. And suddenly, everything made painful sense. You had reached out believing there was still something worth saving. You had asked for a conversation. You had left the door open. But instead of receiving your soulmate's truth, you were handed a rejection created by someone else. At the exact same time, your soulmate was being told that you had already given up. Both of you were being pushed in opposite directions. Both of you were being given different versions of the same story. And both of you eventually stopped reaching out because each believed the other had already made the final choice. Your soulmate lowered the phone and whispered, "They thought I rejected them." No one answered. Their voice broke again. "All this time, they thought those were my words." That realization seemed to hurt even more than discovering the fake screenshot, because now your soulmate wasn't only thinking about what they had suffered. They were thinking about what you must have felt. You may have spent nights wondering how someone who once cared so deeply could suddenly become so cold. You may have replayed every conversation searching for the moment everything changed. You may have blamed yourself. You may have wondered whether you had imagined the entire connection. And all along, your soulmate had been carrying almost the exact same questions about you. Two people. Two broken versions of the truth. One deliberate wall built between them. Your soulmate picked up the recording phone again. For several seconds, they couldn't speak. Then they looked directly toward the camera and said, "I need you to hear this from me now." Their voice was weak, but every word was clear. "I never sent that message telling you to stay away." They paused. "I never wanted you to believe you meant nothing to me." Another pause. "And if you spent all these years thinking I chose silence because I didn't care, I'm sorry." Their eyes filled again. "I cared too much. I was just believing the wrong people." The person beside the bed looked away, because there was something deeply painful about watching someone realize that pride had been built on a lie. Your soulmate continued. They admitted that after the separation, they told themselves you had chosen to move forward. Whenever someone suggested contacting you, they refused, not because they didn't miss you. Because they believed reaching out would disrespect the decision they thought you had made. They convinced themselves they were giving you what you wanted: distance, freedom, a life without them. But now they understood that you may have interpreted that silence completely differently. You may have seen it as confirmation that the fake rejection was real. Your soulmate whispered, "We were both trying to respect a decision neither one of us actually made." That sentence left everyone speechless. Then the person on the phone, the one who had finally started admitting the truth, tried to explain again. They said they had believed enough time would eventually make both of you forget. Your soulmate's expression hardened. "You don't get to decide what people forget." The person apologized. But this time your soulmate asked for something more important than an apology. They wanted everything. Every saved message, every screenshot, every conversation about you. Every piece of information that had been passed between people during the separation. Nothing hidden, nothing edited, nothing explained away. The person on the other end hesitated. Your soulmate immediately noticed. "There's more, isn't there?" Silence. Your soulmate repeated the question. "There's more." It wasn't a question anymore. Finally, the person admitted there had been another conversation, one that happened several months after the separation. And this time it wasn't you trying to contact your soulmate. It was your soulmate trying to contact you. Your soulmate's face went blank. What are you talking about? The person explained that months after everything ended, your soulmate had written a long message. A message they apparently no longer remembered clearly because they had sent it during one of the lowest moments following the breakup. Your soulmate asked, "I sent them something." The answer came quietly. "Yes, but you never received it." Your soulmate stared at the phone. They remembered writing drafts. They remembered opening your contact. They remembered almost sending things, but they had always believed they stopped themselves. Apparently one time they hadn't. One time they actually pressed send, and someone made sure it never reached you. Your soulmate demanded to know what the message said. The person on the phone said they still had a copy. Another file arrived. Your soulmate opened it slowly. The first line immediately brought back the memory. "I don't know whether you still hate me, but I can't keep pretending I don't miss you." Your soulmate began crying before they could finish reading. Because this wasn't a recent hospital confession. This was proof that years earlier, they had already tried to find their way back to you. The message continued. They had written about regret. About missing the ordinary parts of your connection. About wanting one honest conversation without family, friends, or outside voices interfering. They had written that they didn't care who was right anymore. They simply wanted to know whether anything real still existed between you. Then came the line that made everyone in the room completely still. "If there is even a small part of you that still wants me, tell me, and I will come." Your soulmate looked up. Their face was full of disbelief. "I sent this." "Yes, and they never saw it." "No." Your soulmate turned their head away, because now the tragedy of what happened between you was becoming almost unbearable. You had reached toward them. They had reached toward you. Neither message arrived where it was meant to go. And the people controlling the information around both of you had allowed each side to believe the silence was rejection. Your soulmate asked the most obvious question. "Why did you stop my message?" The person on the phone said they believed reconnecting would only restart the conflict. They thought everyone had finally begun moving on. They believed keeping you apart was still the better choice. Your soulmate responded immediately. "Better for who?" There was no answer. "Better for you." Silence. "Better for the family." Still nothing. "Because it wasn't better for us." That was the moment your soulmate stopped trying to understand the excuses. They had heard enough. They ended the call. But before putting the phone down, they said one final thing. "You're going to send me everything you kept from us." Then they looked toward the person beside the bed. "I want them to get this recording tonight." The person asked whether they were sure. Your soulmate nodded. "And the letter?" Another nod, and both messages. "Yes, they wanted you to see everything, not because they expected it to erase the past. Nothing could erase those years. But they wanted the truth to finally reach the one person who had been denied it for far too long. You." Then your soulmate asked for a few minutes alone. Everyone stepped outside. The hospital room became quiet again. Your soulmate looked toward the recording phone. This time there was no audience, no family, no friends, no one influencing their words, only them. And you. They leaned closer and said, "There's one more thing I need to tell you before this reaches you." Their voice became softer. "I've been afraid to say this because once I say it, I can't hide behind anything anymore." They took a long breath. Then they admitted that even after everything happened, even after years of separation, they had never allowed themselves to make one particular promise to anyone else. A promise they once believed belonged only to you. They said there had been opportunities. There had been people who asked for commitment. There had been moments when everyone expected them to finally close the chapter. But something inside them always stopped. Not because they were waiting for a miracle, because somewhere deep inside, they still felt that your story had ended without the truth. And now they knew they had been right. Your soulmate looked directly into the camera. "I don't know what you'll do when you hear this." They swallowed hard. "You might never want to speak to me again." Another pause. "And I'll understand." Then their voice broke. "But if there is still even one unanswered question in your heart, ask me." They closed their eyes for a moment. "This time, nobody else gets to answer for me." The recording should have ended there. But just as your soulmate reached toward the phone, someone knocked urgently on the hospital room door. The same person who had been gathering the old messages walked back inside holding another envelope. They looked disturbed. Your soulmate immediately asked what was wrong. The person placed the envelope on the bed. This was mixed in with the old letters. Your soulmate looked at the handwriting. It wasn't theirs. It wasn't yours either. There was no date on the front, only one sentence. "Do not let them ever find out why they were really separated." Your soulmate slowly opened the envelope. And after reading the first paragraph, they realized the fake messages may not have been the beginning of the betrayal at all. They may have been created to hide something much bigger that happened before either of you ever started pulling away. Your soulmate held that envelope with both hands, but for several seconds they couldn't bring themselves to continue reading. The sentence on the front had already changed the entire meaning of what they thought they had uncovered. Until that moment, they believed the fake messages had been created simply to force distance between the two of you. But this letter suggested something much more deliberate. Something had happened before the separation, and someone had been terrified that you and your soulmate would eventually discover it together. They unfolded the first page. The handwriting was unfamiliar. But the names inside were not. Your name appeared almost immediately. So did theirs, and then another name appeared, the same person who had been interfering from the beginning. Your soulmate read the first paragraph once, then again. Their face slowly lost its color, because according to that letter, the people around your relationship had not suddenly decided to interfere after things became difficult. They had been discussing the two of you long before either of you realized there was a problem. There had been a private conversation, a meeting, and neither you nor your soulmate had been invited. The letter described several people sitting together and talking about your future as though the decision belonged to them. They discussed your relationship, your plans, the possibility that the two of you might become more serious. And according to what was written, one person became extremely worried when they realized your soulmate was preparing to make a major commitment to you. Your soulmate stopped reading. A commitment? The person beside the bed looked confused. Your soulmate searched their memory. Then suddenly something came back. Months before the separation, your soulmate had been planning something they never told you. Not because they wanted to hide it forever, because they wanted it to be a surprise. They had been thinking seriously about changing the future of your relationship. They had started looking at what life together could actually look like. They had even spoken privately with someone about taking the next step. But somehow, that information had reached the wrong person. And according to the letter, that was when the interference truly began. Someone became afraid that once your soulmate made that commitment, separating the two of you would become almost impossible. So instead of waiting, they decided to create doubt early. Small doubt, nothing obvious, nothing dramatic enough for either of you to notice immediately. They began with innocent comments. Are you sure they understand you? Do you really think your futures match? Have you noticed how different things have been lately? Little questions, little suspicions, tiny emotional cuts. Your soulmate remembered hearing those exact kinds of comments. At the time, they dismissed them, but repetition changes people. One question became 10, one warning became another. And eventually, your soulmate started noticing problems they might never have considered otherwise. The letter said the plan was never supposed to become as extreme as it eventually did. At first, they simply wanted your soulmate to delay the commitment, but when that didn't work, someone decided stronger pressure was necessary. Your soulmate kept reading. Then they reached one sentence that made them stop completely. They must never compare what each of them has been told. Your soulmate stared at those words. That sentence explained everything. The entire strategy depended on keeping you and your soulmate from having one honest conversation. Because if the two of you compared stories, the manipulation would collapse. If you asked each other what had really been said, the lies would become obvious. If your soulmate showed you the screenshot, you could immediately deny writing it. If you showed them the rejection message, they could immediately tell you it wasn't theirs. So the people interfering had to make both of you too hurt, too angry, or too proud to communicate directly. And somehow they succeeded. Your soulmate lowered the letter. Their voice was barely audible. They didn't just separate us. Then they looked toward the person beside the bed. They made sure we wouldn't talk long enough to discover how. That realization was terrifying, because it meant many of the arguments between you may have been reactions to information neither of you actually possessed. Your soulmate began remembering specific moments. The time you asked why they suddenly stopped trusting you. The time they accused you of hiding your true feelings. The moment you told them, I don't even understand what you think I did. At the time, your soulmate thought you were avoiding the truth. Now those words sounded completely different. Maybe you genuinely had no idea. Maybe you were standing in front of someone you loved while being judged for conversations that never happened. Your soulmate covered their face. I made them defend themselves against things they never did. The person beside the bed quietly said, You didn't know. Your soulmate looked up. But I didn't ask. That was the part they couldn't forgive easily. They could blame manipulation. They could blame lies. They could blame outside pressure. But deep down, they knew they had also made one painful mistake. They trusted everyone except the one person who deserved to be asked directly. You. They returned to the letter. Halfway down the second page, the tone changed. Someone had written about a specific event. A gathering where both of you had been present. Your soulmate remembered it immediately. Nothing terrible had happened that night. At least that was what they had always believed. You had talked, you had laughed, everything seemed normal. But according to this letter, while you were in another room, someone pulled your soulmate aside. They told them you had been speaking privately about leaving. Your soulmate remembered the conversation. They remembered how their stomach dropped. They remembered looking across the room at you and wondering whether your smile was hiding something. But the letter now revealed that, at almost the exact same time, someone else had pulled you aside. And you were told your soulmate had been questioning whether they still wanted the relationship. Both of you left that gathering carrying the same fear. Neither of you knew the other had been given a matching lie. That night may have been the first real crack, not because love weakened, because suspicion was planted deliberately on both sides. Your soulmate stood up slightly from the hospital bed despite being told to stay comfortable. They were becoming restless. They wanted dates, names, proof. They wanted to know how many moments from your relationship had been quietly manipulated. Then they noticed a small note written in the margin. 3 words. Keep the receipt, your soulmate frowned. What receipt? The person beside them searched the envelope again. Nothing. They checked behind the pages. Still nothing. Then they noticed the envelope had a thicker inner lining. Something was hidden inside. Carefully, they tore along the edge. A folded slip of paper fell onto the bed. It was old, faded, but still readable. A payment receipt. Your soulmate stared at it. Someone had paid money. Not a huge fortune, but enough to make the situation suddenly much more serious. There was a date. The date was just days before the first fake information about you began circulating. There was also a handwritten note beside the payment. Make sure the message reaches them before they meet. Your soulmate's hands began shaking. This was no longer only about someone giving bad advice. Someone had paid another person to deliver something, possibly the fake screenshot, possibly another lie, possibly something neither of you had discovered yet. Your soulmate looked toward the camera still recording. If you're watching this, I need you to know I had no idea any of this happened. Their voice became emotional again. I don't know what you were told about me. They swallowed hard. But now I'm afraid there may be more. The person beside the bed examined the receipt closely. There was an initial beside the payment. Only one letter, but your soulmate recognized it. They had seen that initial somewhere before. On old cards, on notes, on documents connected to someone their family trusted completely. Your soulmate whispered a name. The person beside them immediately looked shocked. Because if that initial belonged to who they thought it did, the person behind all of this wasn't some distant outsider. It was someone who had been allowed into some of the most private moments of your soulmate's life. Someone who had comforted them after losing you. Someone who had watched them cry. Someone who had repeatedly told them it was probably meant to end. And now there was a receipt suggesting that same person may have paid to help make sure it ended. Your soulmate grabbed their phone again. This time they didn't call. They searched. Old photographs, old conversations, old dates. They were trying to remember where that person had been during the weeks everything collapsed. Then they found something. A photograph taken only 2 days before the fake screenshot appeared. Your soulmate was in the picture. So was the person connected to the mysterious initial. But there was someone else standing in the background. Someone you would immediately recognize. Your soulmate enlarged the photograph, then enlarged it again. Their expression changed. Because the person in the background was holding an envelope that looked almost identical to the one now lying on the hospital bed. Your soulmate asked, "Who took this picture?" The answer made everything even stranger. You did. For several seconds, nobody understood what that meant. Then your soulmate remembered. You had been there that day. You had apparently been much closer to the truth than either of you realized. Maybe you saw something. Maybe you heard something. Maybe that was why certain people became so desperate to create distance immediately afterward. Your soulmate turned back to the hidden letter. There was only 1 page left. At the top, someone had written, "If they ever remember what happened that afternoon, everything will come out." Your soulmate's heart started racing because they remembered the afternoon, not completely, only pieces. You asking them a strange question. Someone interrupting before they could answer. Your soulmate being called away unexpectedly, and you leaving much earlier than planned. For years, they assumed you left because you were upset. But now they wondered whether someone had made sure you left before you could tell them what you had discovered. They continued reading. The final paragraph revealed that you had apparently confronted someone that afternoon. You had seen something you weren't supposed to see, and before you could speak to your soulmate privately, someone convinced you that your soulmate already knew about it. That changed everything. Because you may have walked away believing your soulmate had participated in something that was actually being hidden from them too. Your soulmate looked directly at the camera again. Tears were running down their face. What did they make you believe I knew? They weren't expecting an answer. But someone at the hospital door quietly said, "I think I know." everyone turned. A family member had been standing there, listening. They looked terrified. Your soulmate asked what they meant. The family member stepped into the room holding an old phone, a phone that hadn't been used in years. They said they had kept it because there was something on it they never knew whether they should reveal. Your soulmate demanded to see it. The phone was turned on. After several attempts, an old audio file appeared. The date matched that mysterious afternoon exactly. The family member pressed play. At first, there was only background noise, then voices. One belonged to the person connected to the payment receipt. Another voice belonged to someone your soulmate trusted deeply. And then, very faintly in the background, your voice could be heard. You had apparently recorded part of the conversation without realizing what it would eventually prove. Your soulmate listened carefully. Then one sentence came through clearly. If they find out what we promised before the relationship began, they will never forgive us. Your soulmate froze before the relationship began. That meant whatever was being hidden went back even further than anyone had imagined. The fake messages, the intercepted calls, the manipulated separation. Those may have only been attempts to protect an older secret. Your soulmate looked at the final page of the letter. At the very bottom was one last line, a line written in different handwriting. Ask the mother what she promised. And when your soulmate read those words aloud, the family member holding the old phone immediately started crying. Because apparently, the promise mentioned on that recording was real, and your soulmate's mother knew exactly what it was. Your soulmate looked toward their mother, and for the first time there was nowhere left for anyone to hide. The room became completely still. Their mother lowered her eyes and admitted that years ago, before your relationship became serious, certain family members had made a private agreement about the future they wanted for your soulmate. They believed they were protecting them. They believed they knew what kind of life would be best. And when you entered the picture, that old promise suddenly became threatened. Their mother admitted she never expected the interference to become so cruel. She never expected fake messages, hidden calls, or years of unnecessary separation. But she also admitted something that broke your soulmate's heart. She had known people were trying to create distance between the two of you, and she stayed silent. Your soulmate asked only one question. Did you know they still loved me? Their mother began crying. Yes, that answer changed everything, because it meant you had not been forgotten. Your feelings had not been invisible. Someone had known the truth and still allowed your soulmate to believe you had walked away. Your soulmate turned toward the recording phone and said, I can't change what happened to us, but I can finally stop hiding from it. They admitted their mistakes without excuses. They admitted they should have trusted you enough to ask questions. They admitted they allowed fear, pride, and other people's opinions to speak louder than their own heart. And then they said the words they had apparently wanted to say for years. I never stopped caring about you. Their voice broke. I just stopped believing I was allowed to. The hospital room remained silent as your soulmate continued speaking directly to you. They said they were not asking you to erase the past. They were not demanding another chance. They were not asking you to immediately trust someone who once failed to trust you. They only wanted you to finally receive the truth that should have reached you years ago. You were not abandoned because you weren't enough. You were not forgotten because someone better came along. And you were not imagining the connection the two of you once shared. Your soulmate had felt it too. They had carried it through every year of silence. Then they made one final promise. No one will ever speak for me to you again. If you ask a question, they will answer it themselves. If you want the truth, they will give it without hiding behind family, fear, or old mistakes. And if you decide there is nothing left to rebuild, they said they will respect that too. Because this time, loving you means respecting your choice. Before ending the recording, your soulmate looked into the camera one final time. Their eyes were full of tears, but their voice was calm. If there is still one small part of you wondering whether I ever truly loved you, please stop wondering. I did. I do. And whatever happens after you hear this, I needed you to know that the greatest regret of my life was letting other people convince me to lose someone my heart never wanted to leave. Then they pressed stop. No dramatic promise, no demand, no pressure, just the truth. The message that should have reached you years ago had finally been sent. And for the first time since everything fell apart, your soulmate was no longer waiting for someone else to decide how your love story should end. That decision now belongs only to the two people it always should have belonged to, you and them.